Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our live webinar from Customer Journey Mapping to Journey Orchestration, revealing customers' real journeys and nudging them towards their goals. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Anthony Odlar. I head up product and specifically product marketing at inQuba, and I'm joined by Margot. Margot, do you want to say hi?
Hi, yes, thank you, Anthony. Welcome, everyone.
Let me do a little bit of housekeeping and tell you how things are going to go today. So I'm going to be doing a presentation for the first little bit and taking you through the PowerPoint that we are currently looking at, and then we're going to run a quick poll. We really want your opinion on a couple of things, and straight after the poll, I'm going to be switching to Margot, who will then take us through a solution demo, a software demo, which is going to be very exciting. And then we will end with some Q&A. So it's a good time to mention that if you have any questions during the course of this webinar, you'll notice that there's a little questions section on your webinar widget. Please feel free to submit anything. We'll obviously try to handle as many as we can. And then, as you know, there are going to be some complimentary papers available. I'll tell you more about that in a little while. And obviously, because you've attended, we're going to make sure that you have the slideware and recording in your inboxes quite soon. So you should be able to get your hands on that. So I'm going to kick off now. I think I've handled all the housekeeping that I wanted to. So let's get into the presentation. We have a fair amount to get through. So what are execs? What's keeping execs awake at night? What are they thinking about? Well, a lot of things, obviously, but here are just a couple of them. The rising cost of acquisition, especially in the online space with digital channel adoption and what have you, it's becoming more and more expensive to actually acquire customers because they have so many options available to them. Switching costs and lapses, this is obviously related. Customers have so many options available to them now and so much choice that lapses are becoming a greater and greater thing. The growing distance between business and client. So touch has never been so important, but it is dwindling. If you think of ecosystem services, you would have noticed that there's so much complexity now with the number of services and products that are available, and trying to maintain a single view of customers across all those products and services is increasingly complicated. Exploding data, you'll know that your business probably has all the data that it needs in order to get all the insight that it needs. But what is ultimately important is actually extracting the stories from the data. And return on CX initiatives. CX professionals walk the line between trying to satisfy internal stakeholders as well as trying to satisfy customers. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to illustrate a return on CX initiatives ongoingly. So that's some of them. But also what we can say is that a lot of these problems would be solved if we were able to boost acquisition, retention, and cross-sell. Or maybe put another way, acquisition, retention, and cross-sell, if we were to boost them, would essentially make a lot of these problems lesser problems. So our approach to meeting this challenge, and you're going to see the slide a few times today. We're just going to focus on them portion at a time. So let's look at the first three. The first three being helping end customers achieve their desired outcomes. That drives revenue. Top right is delighted customers are more correlated with excellent customer journeys than perfect touch points. And the third one about empathy. Empathy is achieved by listening to and understanding customers across their journey. So how can acquisition, retention, and cross-selling be ensured along the customer's journey? Here's a stylized image of a customer journey where we're looking at something like a card application process in this particular case. And I'm just going to illustrate how acquisition, retention, and cross-sell can basically be addressed through different activities and interventions as customers progress through their journey. So let's take something like an activation. The card has been applied for, activation has not happened yet, and we're able to then reach out to the customer and say, hey, Charlotte, we see that you may need some help. Maybe it's taking longer than it should. The customer replies with yes, please, and based on her response and some text analytics processing, we're able to create a case, assign that to someone in the business, and make sure that someone reaches out and resolves the issue for her. There's a little reminder that we've actually got a real case study coming up which deals with a card application process at one of our banking customers. So let's look at something like administration. Here, Charlotte applied for a credit limit increase. However, she's frustrated. So she takes to the social web, she complains about it. We pick that up through our application. We're able to respond to her. And then in the same way, we create a case and actually assign that to someone in the business. And the situation is resolved. Let's look at finalization. So finalization of the card application process and the activation. We're now in a situation where we can actually reach out to Charlotte and ask her for her rating. How did it actually go? She gives us an 8 out of 10, which looks great. And we take that information and we associate it with her, then we understand more about how she feels about her satisfaction, and that type of thing. As we've been interacting with Charlotte, we've been collecting more and more information about her. We're now in a position to actually make her an offer and actually present her something which is compelling and interesting and we believe relevant. So we're able to reach out to her in a marketing sense and actually either cross-sell or upsell. She makes the purchase. And like I said, all the information that we collect about Charlotte, we actually associate with her profile, and I'll show you what that looks like in the solution. We associate it with her profile and make sure that everything we know about her is available from a communications perspective, so that we can actually build rules based on what she receives and what she doesn't. So back to the slide. Let's just look at the fourth point there. Customer centricity is a cultural challenge, and interventions at key journey points, as we've just illustrated now, helps customers to achieve their goals. I'm just going to take a minute now to introduce us. For those of you who don't know us, once again, thanks for joining us on this webinar. I am in fact sitting in Johannesburg, South Africa. We have offices obviously in Australia. Margot, who said hi earlier on, is sitting in Sydney, and we also have an office in North America. A quick view of some of our clients. You'll see that we play quite hard in the financial services and insurance space, but we also have clients in telcos, hospitality and lifestyle, as well as retail. In terms of our services and software stack, we're obviously talking a lot about Journey Analytics today, which is top left, but Journey Analytics is supported by the rest of our modules or the rest of our solutions, which are basically Engage, which is a marketing solution, Social Media, which is a listening tool, inQuba CX, which is voice of the customer, and inQuba Case Management, which is basically closed loop service recovery mechanism. In terms of recognition, we're very pleased to have been recognized by both Forrester and Gartner, most recently, end of last year, in the Gartner Market Guide for Voice of the Customer, November 2018. We were pleased to see that we came out as one of only 2 global CX providers, or Journey Analytics providers, globally, who scored top marks for 3 areas being reporting and analytics, customer journeys, and professional services. Right, back to Journey Analytics, customer journey maps versus real customer journeys. Some people may be surprised by the distinction. This is a traditional customer journey map. I'm sure this is familiar to everyone. We can see what looks like a customer journey across the top, which has a series of experiences. Experiences have touch points, so in other words, the channels through which they can happen. And then sometimes we have areas of where there are measurements, where there are additional channels, perhaps some of them even have a sentiment indicator. And in many cases, we believe that this is what, well, the market believes this is exactly what the customer experiences. The customer would start on the left and move towards the right and move through all of these points sequentially. Of course, that is not the case, because customers' experiences are far more complex and far more messy, if you like. If you've applied for a credit card anytime recently, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So just to illustrate this point, let's have a quick look at an application experience. We have 4 steps of the application experience, from application through to activation, and we have a series of channels through which any one of those experiences could actually happen. We might even have the notion of a preferred customer journey. So we might have modeled the customer journey as starting on the web, carrying on the web, then moving through to email and finishing on the web. And this might be our preferred one from a business perspective because it is efficient and there are cost savings and so on, but this is obviously not what customers experience. Customers may experience something more like this. Charlotte started in a branch, got confused, went to the website, managed to progress to the website, but then called the call center agent who bounced her back to the branch. The branch bounced her back to the call center agent. She did manage to progress. She got her documents, which was exciting until she looked at them and realized they were wrong. So she took to the social web, complained about it. The call center agent reached out to her, solved the issue, but not enough that Charlotte actually progressed. You'll notice that she didn't actually reach activation. So this is probably a good example. In fact, this is probably quite a neat example of a customer journey. And what we're really wanting to do is we're wanting to extract all these customer journeys and aggregate them so that we're able to create paths and create visualizations of paths, longitudinal paths, that show exactly where customers are going and where they are getting stuck and where they are basically dropping off and going away. That's then obviously the first step. The first step is visualizing it, and this is just a little bit of a product shot from our side. The first step is visualizing it. The second step is then being able to predict what is going to happen and intervene to help customers who are getting stuck. And we do that with case management, we do it with communications, even marketing now and again. We do it with dialogues in order to offer information to help people with the information that they need, and so on, all in order to nudge them towards their goals. So back to this, we're going to look at the last two, which are in order to get a full view of the customer's individual journey. In order to get a full view of the customer's individual journey, integration of diverse data types is required. And we'll deal with that in a moment. And large client bases need to leverage big data and machine learning and digital interactions to empathize at scale. But how is all of this achieved? We're obviously saying that this is all achieved through customer journey management, which is what we're talking about today. But is there in fact an ROI when it comes to this? So we're going to now refer to a study that was done by the Aberdeen Group, where what they did was they researched over 200 B2B businesses, and they compared the businesses that had formalized customer journey management programs, where they compared those businesses to the businesses that didn't. And here are some of the numbers that popped out. In terms of customer win-back rates, 14 times was the multiple. That's the businesses with the programs versus the businesses that didn't have the programs. 3 times the revenue from referrals compared to others. And annual improvement in return on marketing investment, ROMI, 54% greater, so in other words 25 versus 16, amongst those who had the formalized programs. There were a number of metrics that I haven't mentioned now, including social media mentions, average sales cycles, cross-sell and upsell, and that's all available in the report. If you're interested in the report, I'm sure we can help you to get it as well. So what are the journey steps? Well, according to Forrester, I mean, we didn't make this up ourselves. According to Forrester, the 4 journey steps are journey design and planning. So in other words, these are the steps in terms of advancing your customer journey management initiatives. They would be journey design and planning, which is about a repository of journey maps. It's about data fusion, which is connecting all the data sources within the business. Journey and testing optimization. And finally, journey automation and orchestration. I'm going to now illustrate exactly how these play out and how they are supported by a lot of our solutions. I'm just going to jump into them one at a time quickly. So journey design and planning, a repository of conceptual journey maps and who's going where. So the customer journey is not a conceptual thing, it is actually configured within the solution. You'll see that this is a view of customer journeys. We have experiences which are supported by sub-experiences, and then we have a level of touch points, which are the channels. But importantly, we also have the quality dimensions, or the things that we want to measure. So you'll see things like overall satisfaction, customer effort, and they are associated with different nodes of the customer journey, and obviously supported by surveys. We're able to set goals, we're able to configure text analytics. So here's just a quick view of the survey builder, where we are wanting to measure something like overall satisfaction. And also, I know it's small, but those are text analytics queries, where we would basically create buckets which would be filled up by verbatim responses that we'd get either through the social web or through verbatim responses within surveys. We would obviously offer our clients rich analytics, right from high-level dashboards like the one you see on the left-hand side, which is NPS loyalty, as well as CSAT, and a view of how the different points on the journey are performing, right the way across to quite operational reports, which can either be, these are examples which are available through our platform online, but can also be made available in a static form and distributed via email, for instance, if that's what the business requires. So that's some of the inQuba analytics. Looking at the second point, data fusion, connecting data sources to create a unified view of the customer. I'm sure there's the question in your minds now of, but where are you getting all this data from? Because it's all over the place. And you're right, it is all over the place. Here are some of your line of business systems, your applications. So you can imagine it being your CRM system, your point of sale, transactional systems. And what we typically propose is, rather than replacing the systems, actually layer a journey analytics solution on top of existing solutions so that we can read the data that's important to the program and provide the business with the visualizations that are important, which are ultimately the longitudinal journeys that the customers are embarking on. This will then give you a view of where customers are getting stuck, where they are progressing. But what are the different types of data? Well, let me just open these up quickly. Starting from the left, it would be the data that we've just been talking about, which is external, in other words, your systems, transactional and external systems. We have quantitative feedback, which is quantitative feedback coming to us typically through surveys. Qualitative, an example of that would be social media or verbatim open-ended responses within surveys. And then we even support the notion of expired transactions or elapsed period. And what that means is where something does not happen, we're able to use that as a trigger. So for instance, Charlotte, who had not activated her card, within a week we were able to, or whatever that trigger is, actually automate a trigger to someone reaches out to her and says, hey, we see that you're not progressing. Here is the single view of the customer. It's fed by a lot of things, events, transactions, social media, sits with it. This is one particular tab of it within our product. It is a view of the customer's details, but it is also a view of what the customer has said to us over a period of time, for as long as we've known them. Different profiles, so it might link, for instance, social media profiles with email addresses, that type of thing, so that we know who she is on the social web as well. And let's jump into the third one, which is journey testing. So testing interventions, measuring results, optimizing engagements. As I mentioned earlier on, visualizing the customer journey is the first step, but then layering the intelligence on top of that so that we can actually interact with people is really where we want to get to. Here, what we've done is we've isolated a particular profile within customer journey. What we've done here is we've compared, for instance, promoters to detractors. We've highlighted them on the journey, and we go through the process of creating a target audience. So we've said, okay, so we're looking at the promoters right now. We want to isolate this particular profile so that when people follow this path or actually qualify to be part of this profile in future, we reach out to them in the following way. And as soon as people qualify by either following a particular path or joining a particular typology, they are interacted with in a certain way based on rules and triggers. And finally, journey automation and orchestration. This is obviously now the interplay between journey analytics and the various other tools that you might want to use for engagements and interactions. And here, for instance, we're looking at inQuba Engage. We looked at the marketing example earlier on. And in the marketing example, we were able to basically build a rule, basically say where people of a particular profile reached a certain point, let's reach out to them in the following way. And that's just a quick view of our graphical interface where we're able to build engagements and marketing communications, not only marketing, but also just engagements for reaching out, offering information, offering help, that type of thing. And analytics, waterfall analytics to show which people are clicking through to which point and so on. We spoke a little bit about case management. So here's an example of Charlotte needing some help and a case being created automatically. And we have a dashboard here which shows the cases which I'm responsible for. So you'd have a number of people in the business who are dealing with cases that come from different areas. And you'd have the analytics to show which ones are escalating as well, why they're escalating, which areas of the business they're coming from. And this is obviously all SLA based, so you want to be resolving these things within a particular period of time as well. Social media listening is, I think, what we're going to look at here. Yes, so our social media product, we're able to basically drop in and pick up mentions of your business or maybe even your competitors, if that's what you want to listen out for. And there are analytics there as well in terms of who is saying what the themes are, because we would process this through text analytics, because it's far too much for a human to read, and see what the themes and categories are, basic sentiment as people talk about your brand and about your competitors. And obviously inQuba CX, which is our voice of the customer solution. It's about surveying, it's about post-experience surveying or even periodic surveying, and the analytics which we have already looked at. And once again, we have actually looked at this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but our single view of the customer, this is where Charlotte's profile lives within the solution. We're able to reach out to her, initiate one-on-one communication, but also see exactly what it is that she has experienced with us. Does she have unresolved cases with us? How has she responded to marketing interactions in the past? What are the themes that are important to her based on what she has been talking about? And that's all bundled around her profile within the solution. So a quick case study. I did promise you a quick case study. One of our banking clients, in fact, this is a credit card application process, was having a particular challenge with people applying for credit cards but then never activating them. As amazing as that sounds, but apparently it's a common challenge. And what we did was, those are the steps of the application process: application, accepting the quote, receiving the card, and then activating. Each of those had states. So for instance, an application incomplete state or an application fulfilled state. Obviously what we wanted to do is we wanted to nudge people, or help our client to nudge people towards the right-hand side where they would actually activate the card. So we started with information collection. We did this through post-experience surveying at all points, and we were surveying people who had successfully gone through the process as well as unsuccessfully. So we got the full spectrum. And this helped us to basically identify the stall points. So what were the stall points and why were they stall points? Then what we did, and this slide gets a little bit busy, I apologize, we employed machine learning to inform communications at every point, so that as people were progressing through this exercise, they received communications from our solution, but always personalized and contextualized by machine learning in order to offer information, offer assistance, offer help. Sometimes that was even a phone call where they said, yes, please, can someone phone me? And the purpose of this was basically to nudge them towards the goal. So the question is, did any of this work? And here's some numbers for you. There was a 108% increase in card activation, and there was a 98% increase in initial spend. We're obviously still doing a lot of work with the bank, and we're hoping to have a few more exciting numbers to share soon, but that's just the initial results of the program. How do we do all of this at scale? Well, we obviously like to talk about what our differentiators are in this case. And as a CX provider, we have very particular differentiators because we're also now strong in the journey analytics space. But just very briefly, big data fusion we've spoken about, dynamic journeys we've been talking a lot about today, sentiment measures, which is our text analytics, customer memory, that is keeping all information we have about every customer, closed loop recovery, which is our case management, engagement communications for marketing and information distribution, machine learning, and our graphical user interface, which allows our customers to build their own dialogues and surveys and manage their own programs. I'm almost done. Imagine you had the capability across millions of clients to see who's on and off their journeys and who's cheering for you. Wouldn't that be a game changer? Well, that's why we're here. It is now that point of this webinar where I'm going to launch a little poll because we would love your opinion on something. How would you best describe your journey management approaches within your business? This is really to try and understand how advanced journey management thinking is within your business. The options are fully implemented. In other words, why are you listening to me? Because you guys are already rock stars. Some basic approaches have been rolled out and adopted is the second option there. Planning and discussion is the third one, and nothing yet. Margot, at this point, I'm going to hand over screen share to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anthony, for that introduction and the background to inQuba's approach to journey orchestration. Great. So what I would like to cover today is to take you through not just the inQuba platform capability, but also the way we're approaching this journey orchestration, and to take you along with a methodology and hopefully give you some ideas or takeouts on how you can apply it to your own areas. So before I jump into the inQuba platform, just to start off with is the journey approach works really well where we want to solve particular problems. So to start off, I want you to try and think of a problem that you are trying to solve, and Anthony described the example with the credit card activations, but some of the other common journey problems that we're looking at with our clients is lapses. So it might be insurance lapses. We're looking at superannuation lapses, where we don't really understand that problem. Another area of problems is around various product applications, which could be in the lending space or on the onboarding space. And a lot of the CX professionals and people who work with have these problems, but it's a challenge to understand why we have these problems and how to solve them. So from a journey perspective, how we start engaging and how we really start looking at solving these problems is to first define the problem. So let's look at lapses, for example. And the first thing is that we've got a problem, we've got lapses, we don't really understand it. And then the second part is, what is the journey? So what is the journey of lapses? What are customers doing before they lapse? How are we engaging with them? How are we presenting them with different offers? What have they done? How have they reached out to us? We then really try to understand the journey. And then we ask the question, well, what is the value of resolving that particular problem? So if we can fix lapses for a segment or an area in the business, what does that look like for the business and obviously for the customers? And that's where you start building out your business case for CX. You start measuring CX from a value delivery perspective. Then the next thing we do before we jump into understanding the journey analytics is we start asking the business what assumptions or questions that we want to answer. And for each of the different journeys and problems, there's a whole lot of assumptions. So for example, around lapses, we've got an assumption that people are lapsing because potentially they can't afford that cover anymore, so they simply stop their payments. But that's an assumption. We don't know if that's true or not. So that's where we want to use a journey approach or journey analytics approach to be able to answer these questions and solve the problems using actual data and investigation. So jumping into just to get to that little bit of introduction, to jump into the actual inQuba platform. So what I'm showing here is an example of a journey analytics. And the first question you probably have is, well, what is this a journey map? Is it journey analytics? Or, what's going on here? And really, from our point of view, is the journey analytics are in effect data-driven journey maps. Although we obviously working through the journey maps ahead of this and coming up with those blueprints is hugely valuable to get people to think around journeys and to think about put themselves in the customer's shoes. But where inQuba really comes in is we take those journey maps or those existing journey maps or those things which are really based on different assumptions, and we plug data into those blueprints or those maps to tell us exactly what customers are doing on their journey. So we start getting a very much a data view. And there's a couple of data things. So we already have a lot of data. We've got transactional data. We've got information about when a customer calls us, when they do online activities, when they request something. So what we do from a journey analytics perspective is we want to map all of those customer interactions from a data perspective to get these visualizations to tell us exactly what steps customers are going through. We can also bring in other types of data. So engagement data is very powerful, and this is very interesting, especially in the retail space where we potentially want to validate journey behavior with campaign conversions, for example. So we not only know what steps or interactions customers have interacted with us on, but we also know how we are engaging customers. So you start getting that view of that together. And then what you can do as well is overlay your voice of the customer data. So if you've got NPS or customer satisfaction data with unstructured comments, we can pull in sentiments and themes to really enrich the visualization of what customers are going through. So in this example, it builds on what Anthony presented in his presentation, which is really what the problem we're trying to solve was to promote activation and spend on credit cards. So that was really where the value was, and for the particular bank, the value was if we could increase, and we actually in fact end up doubling that promotion, that spend on those cards, that would be a very, very strong value add for this particular organization. So we've pulled in a number of different data points, and we'll go through this in a bit more detail, but we've got transactional data, so we know where customers are applying for credit cards, and we know what those decisions are. We've got some voice of the customer data, and we've got some engagement data around the promotions. So you can see how we bring all of that information together to get that whole picture of the customer experience. So what we've done now is the first part. So if you go back a bit, we came into the saying we've got a problem, we've got lapses, we don't understand them, we've got whatever your particular problem is how do we solve this problem? So the first thing you need to do to solve a problem is to be able to understand the problem and understand especially the behavior and that. So what the journey analytics is done so far is it's given us really, really good understanding of what this particular problem is. The next thing we want to do is you might have an area on your journeys, and you might have this, is that you want to get even further into the problem. So we can see what's going on. We really, really, really want to dig deep to this problem, and that's where we see the world of voice of customer coming through. And I suppose traditionally, and I've worked on many large enterprise voice customer programs, is we would start with voice of the customer and say something like, we want to measure voice of the customer across the whole organization. We want to group NPS score. But what we're doing from a journey perspective is let's understand the journeys, understand the problems, and then use voice of the customer where it makes sense across a particular journey. So what we did from this point is start to design our voice of the customer very specific to the journey. So here's an example of a survey, and I think the key difference here as well is that we ask different groups of people different questions. So from the journey analytics, we start looking at people who have similar behaviors from a segment perspective. So you definitely probably wouldn't want to ask the people that have gone through a positive journey the same set of voice of the customer questions than those that have gone through a negative journey path, for example. So here we really start to differentiate our questioning and our measurement, our CX measurement around those different journey segments. So here's an example of somebody who's taken up this particular offer. We've said welcome to its onboarding email. We've blended engagement and surveying in this case. We've got our NPS example over here. We can personalize it a lot. So we have two different variations. So if you're a millennial versus an established customer segment, you'll get a different look and feel, for example, of that exact of that survey with those different questions. But it wouldn't make sense to ask these questions to people who haven't taken up a particular offer or haven't accepted that application. So we would have a different line of questioning and a different template to say, well, you haven't got back to us, why? And this is where journey is very different to traditional customer experience. So here we're asking why a customer did something. So we're really trying to understand deeply the behaviors that customers are going through. So here we say, well, why didn't you take this offer up? And we have some various reasons around that. So what we've done now is we're starting to really enrich and drill down into that particular problem area, and we can ask customers questions to give us the answer to understand what those behaviors are. So why did you lapse? Was it affordability? Did you change bank? There could be 100 different reasons, and once we understand those underlying reasons, we can start solving the problems. So we come back to our journey, and we take those insights, and the way we're working with our clients is at this point we've got deep insights into why problems are happening, and then we engage the business to say, well, how do we solve these problems? And then working with different areas in the business to say, well, potentially if you've got a negative journey path, or we've got different triggers that are telling us that something's about to go wrong. So for example, from the journey, we might see that certain things in the journey would lead to a customer lapsing. We can then create a case, and inQuba does that through case management. And we'd be able to create a set of cases, have somebody call that person back, and deal with it as a negative journey path or an intervention in that particular journey. So you can start resolving negative customer experiences. And this can be the combination of different rules from not just from a negative customer feedback, but from maybe a customer who is a certain age, who's maybe nominated a financial advisor, who's run the call center, whatever those triggers are that we know that lead to those negative outcomes, we can then use case management to trigger that. As Anthony mentioned, we then, by the nature of the journey analytics and the capability, we start to bring together all the information relating to a particular customer into a single view of the customer. And this view really builds from the moment we get that first interaction or that first transaction about a customer, and we can start linking, well, the platform actually starts linking all of this information together. So we are continuously building this richness in terms of our understanding of this customer, their behavior, what they do, what they don't do. We understand their interactions. We can talk directly to the customer from here. And interestingly, we can have a look at any sort of unstructured feedback that's coming through and really get to the core of what is working for this customer or what is not working for that customer, and use different at-risk triggers to tell us which customers are likely to lapse or not lapse. So now we've resolved some of the negative journey paths, but beyond that, we want to start transforming our customers, and we want to nudge customers towards particular goals, for example, to promote spend in this case, or to complete an application process. And that's not about interventions, that's about engagement. So from a platform perspective, what we are able to do is we can select a number of different customer paths and create what we call a target audience filter. And what it does is it gives us the ability to create a list of customers that are traveling down a particular path and do something with those customers. So we could feed that list into an engagement campaign, and we can obviously drive those from the inQuba platform as well. Here's an example of the promote spend campaign, and in this case, we used some machine learning models to be able to, on the fly, work through different variations to determine what would be the most effective engagement for a particular person based on that single view data that we had, to be able to optimize the campaign almost in real time. And that's really what drove up that success rate in terms of the conversions. These engagements in different contexts. So for an application process, it could be updates. So one of the problems we know and we've seen through the journey analytics is that the reason why people don't always complete an application process is because they don't really know where they are in that, and they don't get any information back from the provider. We could then, if we identify that as the problem, we can then engage those customers to give them updates. Similarly, if customers don't take up a certain product, we could engage them to offer them alternate products using the information that we know about that customer and the paths that they have been on previously. So from a journey approach, we haven't only been able to really understand the problem that a customer is having, but then we are able to use different tools and strategies to be able to solve those problems. And then we can come back to our journey analytics and actually see how that has been impacted and how those improvements play out across the journey. And that's where we get to the point of being able to provide a business case for the efforts and the projects we do. Not just a business case in terms of the dollar outcomes, which we do get, and as I mentioned, we've seen on a lot of the projects of doubling conversion, but from a customer perspective, being able to show that we can get double the amount of customers who start a process and come out on the other end. And using a journey approach, we can get those metrics really quickly. So within a 2 to 3 month period, you could then have some initial indications of those metrics to feed in a business case. So it's quite a different approach to how we would have traditionally done customer experience, where we measure everything and we find a problem, and then we, a year or 2 years down the line, we start to try and understand what that problem is. What we are proposing is an approach where we solve the problems rapidly and we get results, and we move on to the next biggest problem, which is good for the customer, and it's good for the business. Just a couple things in terms of background. So I've covered the key story, but just you might have a question around journey mapping. How does journey mapping fit into all of this? What I haven't showed you, what happens in the background of these journey programs, is we've got something called a CEM model, and this really models the customer lifetime value. So not just the customer experiences, but the customer lifetime value. And we use this to show to do different weighting. So we could start if we are collecting any kind of customer metrics, we can anchor those across the journeys in the different areas. We can have responsibilities and report off and obviously share those insights with people that are responsible. And we can also feed in lots of unstructured data and use text analytics. I'm not going to go through all of that in the demo today. And this last part that I just want to show you is how do we bring in this data. So inQuba realized, I think really early on, that bringing in data in a non-perfect format was really important to being able to do these rapid journey projects. So we don't need a whole lot of data pre-prepared from the client side. You probably already have a whole lot of data and you don't know what to do with it or how to pull it together. How we do it on our side is, I'll run through this quickly, is we map different transactions. So those are each of the different points you saw in the journeys. And inQuba has the expertise and the skill to be able to map those and put it into the language of the customer. We have an integration kit that then allows us to pick up those files. In many cases, those files are being used or being prepared by other areas of the business, and we can use those files or use that pre-existing data. We pull it through here. We define the files. We go through this 4-step process. We can preview the data. Over here, we can obviously upload samples of data. We can pull it off an FTP. So we've made it really easy from a front-end perspective. We can apply any number of different transformations, and this is very powerful when we want to bring things together. And there's a whole lot of capability around how we can change data, because we often get it in codes and numbers, and we can do that, and then we finalize that data. So just a couple of the background things, which, if you are interested, we can go into more detail in a follow-up session. So that's an overview of inQuba's the inQuba Journey platform. It really is around solving journey problems or customer problems or business problems using a data approach or a data journey mapping approach. We do have an option to run a half-day masterclass. So if you do have an area in mind or a problem in mind, please reach out. What we do is we'll pre-prepare some of the journeys, and in that half day we would work through a particular problem and really show how we could pull data together and how we could solve different problems in the organization using a journey analytics or journey orchestration approach.
Thanks, Margot. That was brilliant. I'm just going to take back the screen, just check that this is all working okay. Should be okay. Okay, brilliant. Thank you once again, Margot. That was fantastic. We're going to get into Q&A in a second, and I just want to tell you about this. If you have a look at your little webinar gadget, you'll see that there's a section there called handouts. There are 2 papers within there. There are Journey Orchestration Industry Series. Each one deals with a specific industry. We are always producing this material, and we're adding to this all the time. So why don't you grab these ones? You can get it through the widget, and we will also keep you updated as we release further parts of this which deal with further industries. But these papers really can be applied across industries. So please go and grab that now. We're going to head into some Q&A now. Thanks to those of you who have submitted your questions today as well as before today. Cameron, I have seen your question and I have replied personally, but we just need a little bit more information, so we're going to reach out to you after this webinar. I would like to share the first question, though. This is a question from Gulam. Thank you for that. Margot, if you wouldn't mind having a go at some of these questions. Here's the first one. Do you see any data handling and analytics maturity and experience management maturity at play before organizations can orchestrate or manage customer journeys real time?
Oh, good. That's a very good question. So I'll start with the first part around the data analytics maturity. So from a data analytics maturity, I think that's where the journey approach really helps. From a data perspective, we do need, you obviously need some data to be able to put this together, and as long as we can get key transactional data, I would recommend starting with really deep diving understanding journeys before trying to mature your analytics around the customer experience space. So the answer would be no, you don't need to have a high maturity. We do need available data, but the process of journey orchestration is to discover through the data that we have. So I think it's part of the journey we go on. And then from an experience maturity, I suppose it depends on the perspective. And what I'm seeing, certainly from conversations, is that people are moving away from doing a sort of traditional customer experience type of program where we're doing big enterprise rollouts. And I see that as maturity or maturing in the space where people are saying, you know, we've tried that and it's a lot of work to get results. We want to solve a particular problem and we want to use Journey to do that. And I definitely see that coming through from a maturity, and people have tried and tested other ways of getting results, and hopefully that answers that question.
That's great. Thanks, Margot. Gulam, we did actually see your other questions as well, and we will respond to you on those. Here's another question from Lisa. Thanks for this. We have a number of legacy systems in the business. Each stores aspects of the customer data. My understanding from this presentation is that the Journey solution would create a view of these by pulling them together.
So, Lisa, it absolutely does pull it together, and by the nature of being able to connect all those different interactions to a customer, you're linking that legacy data, which we can obviously organize in a way that's meaningful and then useful to then engage with those customers. And you're 100% right, is historically is one system would only see what they could see and deal with the customer that way. But from an inQuba perspective, we can see all of those interactions, and then we've got that full context to be able to really engage customers in a very meaningful way.
That's great. Let's do one or two more. Thanks for this question, Dan. I'm particularly interested in Journey methods for customer retention. Can you talk a little more about that? So
retention is a key problem across most industries, and Journey works really well for resolving retention. In fact, many of the programs are around how do we retain customers. And from a Journey perspective, it's understanding not just you really want to understand a couple of things that's either driving retention or people to lapse or leave. And by using a Journey analytics perspective, you can start segregating. So we can say, well, what are all the steps or paths and all the things that customers do who do stay, and beyond just an NPS, because there are obviously a lot of external factors. And then the customers that aren't staying, have a look at what those different paths look like. What's driving them? Is it the way we engage them? Is it the way we service them? Or is it a combination of those things, or potentially something external as well? And that's where we would want to deep dive and really ask those customers what happened or why they are doing certain things. And then that really allows us to really understand the drivers for retention beyond just a satisfaction or just an NPS score. We really want to know what those customer paths and profiles look like. And once we understand that, solving for retention becomes a whole lot easier, because then we can see how to optimize engagement, obviously that drives retention, and to keep those customers.
That's great. Thanks, Margot. Let's do a final one. Thank you, Gemma, for this one. We've gone through comprehensive journey mapping exercises in our business. Is this a good starting point?
So journey mapping is very, very powerful. In fact, journey mapping as a discipline really came out of it's probably 40 or 50 years old as a discipline. It came from the service operations design space, and it was very effective there. And as customer experience evolved, it's adopted the journey mapping. And journey mapping as an exercise is extremely valuable because it gets the organization to think about what customers are going through. Certainly, it's some of the high-level problems we can start seeing, and especially from a future, if you're looking to design future journeys, that can be very meaningful. And where we fit in with existing journey maps, if you've done that, is we always use the journey maps as a starting point. So once you've got a journey map for a particular experience or customer journey, it's a great way to start asking people in the organization what they would want to know about these journeys, or what are the assumptions, what are the business assumptions. So there was recently working on a project where there was an assumption that if you post an insurance renewal letter to your customers, they are more likely to stay with that particular super fund. And there's a whole lot of assumptions that we make as businesses that are often beliefs or often untrue. And if you can test those assumptions and really understand, then there's obviously a big case around that. So absolutely, journey mapping is a powerful tool for a number of aspects, and we like it because it gives us that starting point to see where we want to go with those journeys.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Margot. We're going to call it there in terms of the questions. I'd like to thank you for your time. These are our contact details over here. You might want to screen grab this this particular slide. I'd just also like to reiterate something that Margot said in terms of a fantastic next step for your business might be a masterclass. We run masterclasses which are a couple hours long, and what comes out of that masterclass, and we can either run it within your business or we occasionally host more general ones. What will come out of that is you'll actually end up with a journey management design where you have designed it according to your own customer journeys, the interactions that happen within your business, so that you actually have a starting point for starting with your journey management program within your business. As we've seen, most people on this call do not have fully implemented journey management programs within their business. So I think it's worth consideration. And if that sounds interesting, then please reach out to Margot or myself. And like I said, you will also be receiving the recording as well as the slideware that was used for this particular webinar. So that is everything from me. Margot, do you want to wrap up with a quick 30 seconds?
Absolutely. So thank you, Anthony, and thank you everyone for joining this session today. We appreciate your time. I am based in Sydney. I'm going to be in Melbourne next week and Brisbane the week after. So if you'd like to catch up for a coffee and talk about this further, or a call, please do reach out and have a chat. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.